FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and today is June 4th, 2020. Well, got a special treat for you today. But first, as always, you got an issue, you got something you want to discuss, something you feel is important, needs to be brought to my attention, the public's attention. Why don't you send me an email? The email address is kl@kerrylutz.com, kl@kerrylutz.com. Well, got a great guest on with me, long-time fan of the show, been listening for years, and his name is Tom from the East. We'll leave it at that, but somebody who I've been in much email contact with. I wanted him to come on the show a long time ago. Finally, he decided he'd come on, and well, Tom and I have a good history together. Tom, welcome to the show. It's really great to finally have you on.
It's wonderful to be here, Kerry. Thank you so much for having me on.
Hey, so we kind of really got seriously started communicating. I shared with you the fact that my sister was gravely ill, and I kind of reconciled with other family members, and just that my feeling was you shouldn't just wait to the end to make a reconciliation. If it's possible, do it now, because all of our days are numbered, and you never know when it's your day. And Tom, you took that to heart. I mean, so many times you say things on the show, you say things on the radio. You don't know if anybody's listening or not, but you were definitely listening.
Well, my story was somewhat similar, and that podcast really brought it home to me. At the time, my daughter and I had not been speaking for quite some time, primarily due to my own pride and, self-deceit, into looking back on our relationship and only wanting to see the good that I did, but not taking full accountability for some of the bad things that I did. And that show really hit home, because it made me realize our days are short, and we do need to reconcile with those we love. And I never stopped loving my daughter, but I was just letting my pride get in the way. And kind of like you always say sometimes with the old Mike Tyson quote, I needed a punch in the face from you to change my plan. My plan was wrong.
Yeah, your plan wasn't working too good in the ring of the boxing ring of life. And look, everybody goes through this. We all make mistakes in relationships. I mean, you show me the person who hasn't screwed up a good relationship through pride or ignorance or being opinionated or whatever. Look, you have to. What I found is, I raised 3 children on my own, literally from the time they were little kids to adults, and they all turned out pretty well. I'd like to think at least it's partly due to my efforts, but partly due to them as well. Luck plays a role in it, but you have to really work on these relationships and not get into the situation where the pride kicks in and really makes you do something that you regret later. You got to determine what's more important, my pride or my relationship with the ones that I love. And I mean, I don't, Tom, I don't run a counseling service here or a self-help show in terms of psychology. I'm not a therapist or anything else, although I think I've got some insights. But really, when it comes down to your family, what's more important than that?
Well, exactly. I feel the same way, Kerry. And I think you do have some qualifications for being a psychologist or a self-help guy. You certainly handle yourself well on many topics that have changed how I've looked at life, whether it be finances or my family, or just any number of topics. And I think that's what I like so much about your podcast, that you do not pigeonhole yourself into one area, that you're kind of a Machiavellian type fellow, and you're capable of much more than I dream I ever will be. So,
oh, well, that's too kind of you. But look, we're all limited. Our knowledge is by nature of knowledge limited. Socrates said, "I'm the wisest man in Athens because I know that I don't know." And my father used to tell me, like in business, if you don't know something, find somebody who does. You can't know everything. Find an expert who you think is trustworthy and listen to what that person has to say. And I think in my life, I've followed that, sometimes to my detriment, but usually to my advantage. For instance, being a lawyer for 30 years, I seldom ever represented myself in any transaction, even though I was probably qualified to do it. And even though I would have had no problem doing it, because emotions are a crazy thing. So let's talk about some things that we talk about on the show and get your views here. I kind of know what they are already because we do email regularly. But as far as the state of the economy before COVID-19, before mass civil unrest, what was your take on it?
Well, Kerry, this economy has been in a lot of trouble for a long time. We've blown such financial bubbles in this economy, primarily due to Fed intervention, not letting the economy heal itself through the natural turn of the cycles, the up and down cycles. Everything has to always be up. Everything has to go up, including inflation. For God's sakes, why do we need more inflation? Wouldn't it be nicer to go to the grocery store and buy a steak for $2 less a pound? And there's inflation in some things, there's deflation in other things, but I think the inflation is mostly in the things that everybody needs.
Exactly.
The deflation is in your silly flat screens and things we don't necessarily need. And it pains me to see what we've done to this economy, and seeing, on top of that, the havoc that's been wrought by the COVID-19 and the absolutely horrendous response our governors and our government in general has had to this virus. Instead of putting the people at risk, instead of putting them in quarantine and allowing the economy, which was already fragile to begin with, allowing the economy to keep moving along, we just locked everybody up. Complete police state. Nobody can do anything. And now on top of that, with all the riots that are going on, I think a lot of those riots are an outbreak of people's dissatisfaction with the economy itself.
Yeah, and being locked down for several months, not being able to make a living. We had 40 million people out of work. And now we're supposed to go back to the normal that prevailed before. And wow. What do you say about it? So what about the concept of precious metals investing, or maybe not investing, just allocation in your asset allocation?
Well, I got my view on the metals from my dearly departed dad, who passed away about 10 years ago. He, ever since I was a kid, I collected silver coins. I remember that was back in the day in the 60s when you could go to the bank and get a roll of dimes and pull 3-4 silver dimes out of it, and then take it back to the bank. So I've always been a firm believer in real money, sound money. These clad coins we have now aren't worth a plug nickel, to kind of throw a pun in there, but they're gold and silver. Everybody needs to have some gold and silver. They're really going to protect you in times of deep economic problems. A gold $20 gold piece back in the 30s was worth $20, maybe a little more, 22, 23, something like that. What is it worth now? $1,800? Why is that? Why is a coin that says $20 on it worth $1,800? It's not because it's a pretty coin. It's
Yeah.
because our dollar has devalued by that much since that period in time. I remember when I was a kid, I could go down to Joe Beer's Market in Oneida, New York. It was a little corner market, and little old Joe Beer worked in there, and I'd ask him how much the candy bars would be. All candy bars a nickel is what he would say. You could get a candy bar for a nickel. If you had a quarter in your pocket, you could buy 5 candy bars, no tax. It was beautiful. Now you can't touch a candy bar for under $1.
Yeah, the sales tax a lot of times is higher than the price of the candy bar was, right? And sure.
Not to mention the fact that the candy bars are smaller than they were back in the day. You could have a full meal in a candy bar. Now it's just a little nibble.
And they don't even use real chocolate in the candy bars anymore. They're using cocoa butter and flavoring. So don't even get me started there, because there was nothing better in the world than a Nestle's bar once upon a time. But now it's just, you have to go spend a fortune to get real chocolate, with the real thing that's not fake. But, that's just emblematic of things that have happened in the society. So as far as what's happening now with the civil unrest, what do you think is going to be the end result here?
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Lumina Gold, ticker symbol LUM on the Toronto Venture and LMGDF on the OTC, is yet another of legendary mining investor Ross Beaty's Lumina Group. It's advancing the largest primary gold deposit in Ecuador. The resource is estimated to contain 16.7 million ounces of gold and 2.2 billion pounds of copper. At just $7 US per ounce gold equivalent, it trades at an incredible 13% of its net present value. More good news is on the way with an updated PEA study expected in Q2 of 2020. It has unparalleled infrastructure. There's grid power to camp with plentiful, inexpensive hydropower available. It's close to 2 ports and is just 8 kilometers from a paved highway. Water is plentiful. It's at low elevation, and the closest community, which is very supportive of Lumina's effort, is just a 7-kilometer ride. With all this going for it, it's likely to follow the typical Ross Beaty formula, which means big returns to shareholders. Find out more and sign up for notifications at luminagold.com. That's Lumina, Lumina gold.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
I think ultimately, Kerry, things are going to eventually calm down. Things will slow down. These things always do. Fizzle out over time. Unfortunately, I think it's going to allow a lot of our politicians to do what they do best, and that's pander to certain groups and force legislation through that will ultimately erode our rights even more. That's what politicians do best, retain their power and get more powerful by stomping all over our individual liberties. So I think it's an absolute shame, that these protests arose out of what happened to that poor man with having his neck kneeled on. The police were bad, and it was a horrible thing. But now I think because of these riots, they flipped it around. Now people are having more sympathy for the police, and they want the police to protect them, protect their stores. I think they created the complete opposite effect of what was meant to be. And I don't think it was the protesters necessarily that were doing a lot of the rioting. I think there were agent provocateurs that came in, whether they be Antifa or gangs or whoever. And once one store gets smashed and somebody sees somebody running in and running out, okay, maybe some of the protesters said free stuff, they'll go for it too.
Yeah.
But I honestly don't blame these riots necessarily on the protesters.
Yeah, well, obviously, these are organized. We see the piles of bricks that have been piled up all over the place on the route for the riots. We've seen incendiary devices that have been located in cars and Molotov cocktails stacked up on the route. So we know there's organization behind this, and we could all have our opinions who it might be. But clearly, they're just took the match and lit it. I abhor what happened to that poor guy. but there's something more to this story that we're just not being told here. I just feel that that all of this is too convenient for what's happened. And eventually, Trump will have to call in the military. I don't see anything that's going to stop it short of that.
Well, Kerry, I actually would like to see some of these protesters police their own. I'm sure a lot of these peaceful protesters that are doing what they're doing for the right reason. But if they see some of these other rioters getting out of hand, maybe they could step up to the plate and put an end to it themselves so that their message does not get lost among the madness.
Yeah, and I'm just surprised more store owners aren't being proactive defending their property. That just really surprises me that they haven't taken a stand on this. And, insurance companies, that's another shock to me. The insurance companies are going to be the major losers here. Well, actually, the policyholders, because they'll just jack up the rest of our rates. But insurance companies initially are going to lose billions on this. Why didn't they go figure this out, that it wasn't ending, and go put security around a lot of these structures like Macy's? It's not going to cost Macy's money. They'll get to rebuild the store. It'll look better than ever. It's going to be their insurance company that takes the hit. And then Macy's shareholders, once they raise their rates, to recover all the losses here, which will be in the many billions. So I just don't know why society as a whole has kind of stood by and just watched this whole thing unfold. But anyway, we've got other things to talk about. So our political system obviously is not working, and really, that's a large reason why this is happening here, why the riots are being allowed to continue on unfettered. What do you, as a regular person, want to see or think should happen with our political system to make it more responsive and more on the side of regular people?
Well, I think our political system has been messed up for quite a while. When you only have two people to choose from for president, that's crazy, Kerry. Why do you have to vote for a Republican or vote for a Democrat, or every once in a while a Libertarian may peek in there? Why can't we have 6, 7, 8 people to vote for in the general election for president of the United States? The political system is rigged to keep the two parties, which are unfortunately one and the same, to keep them in power. And I think what we need to see is we need to see more young people, maybe more veterans like Dan Crenshaw. He's one of my favorite guys.
Yeah.
We need to see younger blood getting into the system and changing the system from the inside out. Unfortunately, we have so many dinosaurs that are in the Congress and in the House and the Senate that have been there their entire lives. And why, for the life of me, people keep voting them into office instead of giving a young person with fresh ideas a chance at it. They did it with occasional Cortex, but unfortunately her ideas are totally from left field, and I think nuts. They'll regret putting her in eventually. And I'd be very surprised if she ever gets reelected. But it's still refreshing to see a young person get into Congress. And we really need to think twice before we keep reelecting the same old dinosaurs that have spent their whole life in there. Once you set foot through that door, you are subject to corruption right from the get-go. And it does not take very long to make good men corrupt. And hopefully we can see some changes in the system down the road just by attrition.
Yeah, well, eventually they die off because old senators never leave. They just kind of die in office, or on occasion they get defeated. But it's unusual for an incumbent on either side of the aisle to get defeated in an election or in a primary, all these things. So, and they always, the first order of business for the government, for our representatives, is self-preservation. That comes ahead of everything else, more important than everything else, right? It's all about protecting the organism.
That's correct. That's correct. I'd like to see, and I doubt we will see it in our lifetime, but I would very much like to see term limits, just as a president has term limits, 2 terms. I think the same should hold true for all House of Representatives and senators. 2 terms is enough. You had your shot, leave.
Yeah, a nice thought, and from your mouth. So what about communities, the sense of community where you live? I take it you're in a smaller town, smaller metropolitan area. That sense of community during the pandemic, do you think that came back?
I don't think it ever left where I live, Kerry. We're a very tight-knit community around here. I live pretty much in the country. I do have neighbors across the road and up and down the road, but I have nothing but deer and turkey in my backyard. And we here out in the country, we all seem to know each other. There are farmers, there are construction workers, and we all get along, and we all watch after each other. When I do go down into the small city that's next to where I live, people have always been polite and courteous with each other, holding the door for each other, and I have not seen any changes whatsoever. I'm very blessed and lucky, my wife and I, to live in such a community where so many people know each other, and even those who don't know each other, we all treat each other with respect, and it's a very fortunate situation for myself, and I would never have it any differently. You couldn't drag me kicking and screaming to live in a city. It would just never happen.
Yeah, well, I can totally understand what you're saying, and it is refreshing. I lived in a small town. It was a bedroom community for New York City, but all of us had kids. All of us were there for the schools, and it was a very tight-knit community. When somebody was having a problem, help just mysteriously appeared without being asked or without being requested. And I'd like to see more of that, obviously. So as far as your daughter goes, your children, your dreams, because look, we got less days ahead of us than behind. We kind of look to our kids for our future dreams and aspirations. What is it you want to see your kids do with the rest of their lives?
Well, my daughter is currently living down in Texas, and since we have reconciled, I found out I am a grandfather of a 4-year-old little boy named Jaden. And he's such a blessing. He's such a wonderful child. So and my daughter's being such a wonderful mother. And I would just like to see my daughter and her husband and eventually little Jaden have opportunities abound for them. To have the chains of, and this sounds sappy, the chains of oppression and the stifling of freedoms and liberties lifted off of their backs so that they can pursue whatever dreams they choose with as little hindrance as possible, whether it be from government or from wherever. I would just like to see them be able to have every opportunity in the world to realize their dreams and do whatever it is that makes them successful and happy.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I know exactly what you're saying. And Tom, it's been great to have you on the show. Just piece of advice, something you've learned along the way, along the road of life that you'd like to share with those of you listening?
Never underestimate how wrong you can be without even knowing it.
I love that. That's a great one. And there's a lot of others that I could pile on that, but I think we'll leave it at that. Got a question for myself or Tom? You want to appear on the show? Tell us your experiences, what effect or an effect that this show might have had on you or other shows out there, other podcasts. Forget about regular media. I'm not interested in your Oprah experiences, honestly. But as far as listening to podcasts, to new media, engaging in it, how has it changed you? How's it made you a better person? And how has it brought you closer to those who you love and who love you? Love to hear that story because, look, financial survival, Tom, I don't know if I mentioned, you probably heard on the show, I was thinking of changing the name of the show up until I mean, literally 6 weeks before the pandemic, I was giving it serious thought. And then, because I felt after the Great Recession, they'd blown the bubble back up and things were going okay. I always expected, and you've heard me say it many a time, that the next crash would be far worse than the last one, never knowing how much worse it was going to be. But in any event, financial survival doesn't matter if you have no soul, if you don't have people who care about you and you care about, you have a pretty empty life. So I would say that this is way more important than just surviving financially. You got to survive spiritually. And Tom, you've been a great example of that. Really appreciate you coming on. Email us, kl@kerrylutz.com. Don't forget Twitter's @KerryLutz. Of course, the main site, which is going to have a new facelift any day now and will be more mobile friendly. That is financialsurvivalnetwork.com, and sign up for the newsletter. Tom, it's been a pleasure finally talking to you one-on-one and really getting to know you. And I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Thank you so much, Kerry. I appreciate it.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.